Welcome to the debate. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating concept from our source material, the fortress that refuses to burn. And this archetype, it describes systems or cultures that don't just survive a crisis, but they actively convert these existential threats, things like collapse or economic shifts, into permanent structural strengths.
And, it's hard to think of a cultural phenomenon that exemplifies this better than hip-hop. 50 years in, it is a massive global force, both economically and culturally. But the question is, as the ground shifts beneath its feet, is this fortress just aging into a kind of museum, or does it still have that essential fire that built it?
That is exactly the crux of the matter. We're looking at these structural shifts in business and generational power to ask, does this current transition signal that hip-hop is in fact ending as a dominant youth culture? I'm going to argue that the specific identity of hip-hop, the one defined by its pioneers, is reaching its natural limit. It's aging out, becoming entrenched legacy rather than, immediate rebellion.
And I'll be arguing that the fortress doesn't end, it mutates. Its durability lies precisely in its ability to adapt and fortify itself across, all these new digital ecosystems and global markets. I think it's expanding into a multi-generational, global identity, which proves that resilience, not fidelity to the past, is the real measure of its power.
I understand why you'd emphasize resilience, but let's talk about the specific architecture that I see collapsing. My position is really centered on the version of hip-hop forged by figures like Sean Diddy Combs, starting back in the 90s. This model was built on a foundational earnings backbone, the IRL nightclub circuit, live appearances, show bookings, all the brand tie-ins that came from a physical presence. I mean, the material is very clear that the genre's pioneers, Jay-Z, Nas, Busta Rhymes, Diddy, are now in their 50s and 60s. Their shift from counterculture figures to establishment moguls, billionaires, CEOs, it means hip-hop has achieved empire. But in achieving empire, it loses the essential rebellious edge that you need to lead youth culture, which by definition has to oppose the establishment.
See, that perspective frames reaching critical mass as some kind of a failing. I come at it from a different angle entirely. That transition from artist to mogul is the ultimate expression of the fortress's power. Diddy's whole trajectory isn't a symbol of an endpoint. It's proof that hip-hop can successfully transition from a youth movement to a sustained, multi-layered legacy culture without, ceasing to be relevant. And furthermore, this idea that the business model has collapsed just ignores the successful adaptation. The culture has migrated to new digital fortresses. I mean, look at the data on youth engagement. Platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Shorts, those are the primary engines of cultural creation now. YouTube is literally the #1 TV platform in the US. Hip-hop didn't die when the club circuit faded. It just jumped the fence and claimed a new, much bigger fortress.
It claimed the new fortress, yes, but not with the same ownership structure. And that brings us right to the core issue. The transition from the physical club circuit to digital platforms isn't just an aesthetic shift. It's a fundamental financial and a structural one.
Okay, but define that. What's the structural difference?
The difference is control. The IRL nightclub circuit allowed artists, and Diddy in the 90s and early 2000s is a prime example, to control the immediate means of distribution and profit. They were the spectacle, they were the promoters, and they were the immediate beneficiaries of that live economy. Booking fees were substantial and they were immediate. And that provided the capital to build actual non-digital empires. The digital replacement, streaming and short-form video, is, it's entirely governed by this new digital architecture. And this means algorithms, platform owners, giant labels, they are the new gatekeepers. The flow of revenue is fractionalized, it's delayed. The artist becomes more of an ephemeral content provider in a very volatile ecosystem that's really designed to enrich the aggregators. That closure of the original high-yield, high-control ecosystem signifies the end of hip-hop's original financial infrastructure.
I'm just not convinced that a change in infrastructure constitutes an end to the culture itself. Resilience, as our material defines it, is the capacity to defy collapse and keep growing. Hip-hop's shift from physical venues to digital algorithms, to me, proves its unmatched capacity for globalization and survival. The platform is just the new stage, And if we're going to talk about the technical shift, hip-hop almost immediately mastered the short, loopable hook and the volatile presence that's required for TikTok and Shorts dominance. Look at drill music, for instance. It thrives on that platform volatility. So instead of a financial collapse, I see this as an economic mutation. The fortress adapted from controlling physical space to controlling algorithmic attention.
But that mutation fundamentally changes the character of the culture. And that's our second major point of contention, the difference between rebellion and empire. When the culture's main output is geared toward maximizing global streaming minutes, brand alignment, and building these cross-platform empires, it just inevitably loses that specific element of raw, local, anti-establishment rebellion that made it hip-hop in the first place. When you look at the pioneers, their energy now is focused on sustaining legacy. They're selling luxury goods, producing TV shows about power. The culture becomes stone, stable, lasting, nostalgic. And the actual fire of youth rebellion that moves to new, more chaotic digital creators or niche genres that are actively rejecting that polished establishment model.
I think you're conflating the establishment figures with the ongoing cultural output. The fact that the pioneers achieved empire doesn't mean the genre itself stops producing rebellion. It just means the genre, it seems to me, now has two tracks. You've got the empire track, which provides stability and resources, and then you have the rebellion track, which keeps mutating and challenging the center. And let's talk about the international dimension here, which your argument about a U.S. legacy seems to overlook. The fortress is fortifying itself globally through all these hybrid forms. Look at the explosion of Afrobeats, a hybrid form heavily informed by rap's rhythm and structure, or the integration of rapping into global phenomena like K-pop. These are not nostalgic echoes of the 90s. These are massive, youth-driven cultural exports proving the fire hasn't vanished. It's just globalized and diversified.
Okay, I do acknowledge the massive success of global hybrids like Afrobeats. That movement is often succeeding independent of the aging U.S. moguls, not because of them. So if hip-hop's core model is now defined by its ability to dissolve into other genres, to become an element within K-pop or Afrobeats, doesn't that just confirm its status as a foundational legacy genre rather than the singular dominant youth culture it once was? It's a component, not the engine.
No, I think it proves its ubiquity. The source material shows that resilient cultures become essential components of other emerging movements. The ability to infuse its rhythm and flow into every corner of global music, that demonstrates an unmatched cultural gravitational pull. When we talk about global youth listening habits, hip-hop in its diverse forms, whether it's UK drill, South African amapiano, Korean rap, is the common denominator. It has moved beyond being a single genre to being a cultural language.
That's a compelling point on globalization. Let's bring it back to the distance created by the aging icons and how that affects the domestic youth audience. This polished mogul model it's fundamentally distant from the current youth migration towards these chaotic platform-native creators. Take someone like IShowSpeed, who you mentioned. His reach is undeniable, it's massive, it's volatile, it's global. But is he truly a structural successor to the culture? Or is he just a viral personality who happens to use hip-hop elements to soundtrack his chaos? If the genre's energy is now so dispersed and mediated by creators whose primary skill is platform optimization, it suggests the centralized artistic engine of hip-hop is really failing to capture the current generation. It feels like a sign the center has collapsed.
I would frame the rise of figures like IShowSpeed as the mutation of that rebellious fire into a form that's palatable and accessible to Gen Z. You claim the mogul model's irrelevant because it's so polished, while IShowSpeed embodies the chaos and unpredictability that appeals to that audience, and he often achieves his influence through musical releases and freestyle performances that operate entirely within the modern rap and hip-hop ecosystem. His volatility is the new counterculture. The fact that hip-hop is the vehicle for this chaos shows the culture is not stiffening into stone, it's absorbing the new language of digital youth rebellion. The fortress isn't irrelevant, it's simply incorporating the new barbarian tribes.
But incorporating them at what cost? Longevity, in the context of the fortress, is clearly a success. But the cultural empires built by the pioneers, 50 Cent's successful shift to television with Power, Ludacris moving into film with Fast and Furious, those are triumphs of cross-platform business management, not ongoing youth cultural leadership. They're fortifying their individual legacies, diversifying their risk, which is just smart business. But when the primary focus shifts from producing urgent, culture-defining music to producing IP and managing a portfolio of enterprises, the culture itself is, well, it's relegated to a legacy product. Its influence filtered through corporate structures, not that immediate cultural energy coming from the street.
But you're trying to separate the art from the business, and the material suggests the fortress cannot be one without the other. These men are not just aging out. They are building intergenerational cultural infrastructures. The fact that the highest-rated dramas on cable are often driven by former rappers or that global movie franchises rely on their cultural weight means they are sustaining the context in which hip-hop continues to be powerful. Their resilience is the genre's resilience. They're creating the global scaffolding that allows the new forms, like drill, like Afrobeats, to gain entry and thrive.
So as we draw to a close, I just want to clarify my central point. Hip-hop is not vanishing. Its financial and cultural importance is undeniable. But the specific identity that was forged by the pioneers, the one rooted in youth-driven, nightclub-centric spectacle and raw anti-establishment rebellion, that chapter is definitively closing. The survival we're seeing today is in the form of entrenched legacy of empire and these fractionalized global components. The raw, defining cultural energy seems to have migrated to new, hyper-volatile, platform-native ecosystems. So hip-hop survives as a powerful model for sure, but it is no longer the singular, defining engine of youth rebellion it once was.
And I would just reiterate that hip-hop proves its durability by refusing to burn out. Instead, it fortifies. It has adapted successfully from controlling physical space to mastering digital architecture. Its resilience is evident in its ability to simultaneously support the global empires of its founders and embrace the chaotic digital volatility of new stars and hybrid genres like Afrobeats. The ultimate measure of the fortress is not fidelity to its initial blueprint, but its capacity for continuous profound reinvention. I think hip-hop is currently defining what it means for a global culture to achieve critical mass without losing its edge, even if that edge has sharpened into an entirely new shape.
And the tension remains. Whether a fortress can truly be both legacy and youth, empire and rebellion, all at the same time, or whether one eventually sort of consumes the other.
Exactly. And that tension is precisely what ensures the culture's influence will continue to define the next decade of structural shifts.